All right, hello, welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back. We're doing a bunch of these today.
Yeah, but they didn't need to know that, you son of a
I
bitch.
want to get across the sense of excitement Darnell is feeling.
My tooth aches now, though, so I don't know how much reading stamina I'm gonna have. I might popcorn you a little more frequently.
Talk with your tongue then.
No, I refuse. I always talk with my teeth.
Ew.
Okay, so this is Aetheral Space 1.17. Okay. As Muzazi staggered forwards, falling to his knees, Dragon staggered backwards, looking down at the gun in his hand. Smoke gently drifted up from the barrel, the blue aether he'd used to enhance the stun shot still sparking around the sides of the firearm. He'd done the same thing to Muzazi as he'd done to Skipper back in the hangar, hitting him with an aether-enhanced shot while his defense was diverted. It was a simple strategy, an exceedingly simple strategy, so much so that he hadn't really realized he was doing it until he pulled the trigger. His body had moved automatically, as if this kind of suicidal maneuver were something natural, as if it made some kind of sense. Musashi shuddered, turning his head to look back at Dragon with what was obviously extreme strain. Why? He forced out through clenched teeth. Then he collapsed to the floor. Dragon looked down at the unconscious special officer, hands still gripping the gun for dear life. Why? He really had no idea. It didn't make sense. Why had he done that? He'd got nothing out of it. There were no benefits in it for him, no reward to offset the risk. In fact, it only made things worse for him. It made things astronomically worse for him, and outright negated any positives that could have come from this situation. So, why? He blinked and felt that his eyes were wet. He croaked. He wasn't sure what he was going to say to an unconscious man he just shot in the back, but his mouth didn't come out with anything past that. Hadrian, came a voice. Female voice. It was the person he'd just helped. The one he'd shot Muzazi in the back for. Blaine. No. Ruth. No!
What?
He's calling her Ruth now instead of Blaine. He's totally bought in. The son of a bitch, there's no going back. Now he's calling her Ruth.
I know your names now. I'm invested.
No! Dear God, you stupid son of a bitch.
I feel like he was invested when he shot Musashi in the back.
I know, but like, once the name came in, he just did the anime equivalent of like, can I say your first name now? Are we close enough? Oh, no, dear God, you bought in. Oh, fucking Stockholm Syndrome at its finest. He looked up at her, pointed vaguely at Musashi on the ground. I shot him, he mumbled. Ruth nodded. She seemed just as surprised herself. I know. I shot him. She nodded vigorously. I know! Now come on, there's no time to freak out about it. Ruth reached out, grabbed Dragon by the waist, and started pulling him along.
Wrist, not the waist.
Wrist. Sorry, by the wrist, and started pulling him along. He didn't read, he was still... I don't have my glasses on, sorry, it's a little blurry.
He didn't
He was
resist.
still in shock, staring at Musashi as he was led across the room. They reached the entrance. Skipper! Ruth cried out, letting go of Dragon as she knelt down to help Skipper. Skipper winced as he forced himself to his feet using the wall as support, his hand covering his side. A steady trickle of blood drooled out from between his fingers. He grinned uncertainly. It's not as bad as it looks. It looks awful, Skipper, said Ruth, tearing a strip down from her sleeve and binding it around his wound as a makeshift bandage. I don't know how long this will be good for. We need to get you to a real doctor, or, like, first aid or something. Don't think we'll get the chance, said Skipper, smiling sadly. Listen. Huh? Dragon listened. He heard nothing. His heart dropped. He heard nothing. Skipper nodded at Dragon. Kid gets it. The fighting's over, Ruth. Security's probably on their way up right now. You two should make a run for it. What happened to Bruno/Serena?
Well, who knows?
No! Ruth struck the wall with her fist, leaving a sizable dent. I'm not leaving you behind again! There's nothing else to do, Ruth. You're not dying for me. Before Ruth could say anything more, the room was suddenly bathed in stark blue light. See, this is how insane
we have
I
to
am.
go back a little bit. There was an interruption there.
Oh, sorry. There's nothing else to do, Ruth. You're not dying for me. Before Ruth could say anything more, the room was suddenly bathed in stark blue light, coming through the window. Dragon turned, squinted, his eyes stinging from the hostile ocean glow. Yeah, I almost misread that again, though that's not my fault, because it was blue light and ocean. I almost read that as shark blue light instead of stark blue light. A ship hung there, just outside the window. It was one of the fancy star yachts that the rich and powerful used to make their way around the galaxy in style, all smooth curves and bright colors. Engineering directed his art. I don't think you have a choice in the matter, Skipper, Dragon said quietly. To be honest, I don't see a way out of this one. He glanced down at the man and almost did a double take. Skipper was lying there, bleeding, but still grinning, pure joy written into every feature of his voice. "You don't,"
Face.
he said, laughed. What?
Every feature of his face.
That's what I said, right?
You said voice.
Oh, sorry. Every feature of his face. "You don't?" he said, laughter infiltrating his voice. "I see one, kiddo. I see a big one. Use your gosh darn eyes. Ha ha!" Dragon looked back at the ship. He looked further, past the threatening light, into the clear cockpit just beyond. His eyes widened as he realized just what was going on. The one in the cockpit, the one that sat at the controls of the star yacht, oh, was Bruno Delced! There was a serious expression on his face, a look of utmost concentration. He wasn't used to piloting ships like this. Still, he adapted. But, like, wasn't Skipper the only one who knew what they were going to do with Dragon, and the rest of them are kind of like meatheads? How the fuck are they going to do things without him? Oh, is he going to be like the new Skipper? Because he's also a brain boy?
Skipper's... What do you mean? They're going to take Skipper with them.
Oh, never mind. I thought they were leaving him behind.
They thought they had to, because there's, like, no ship.
With a flurry of movement on the controls, the ship swung around to the side, and the landing doors on the outside of the vessel opened. A clear, well-lit room awaited them on the other side. All they had to do was jump through the office's broken window. "Ruth," said Skipper, "I'd appreciate a helping hand here." I can't decide if Skipper's voice is like Dude Who's High or Patrick Warburton for some reason. That thing I said about soldiers being on their way, that's probably still happening, to be honest.
Peter.
Ruth, "Hey, Peter."
Hey, Ruth.
Ruth nodded, and with a flash of enhancing red aether, tossed Skipper into the waiting ship as gently as she could, which wasn't much. Then she reached down and plucked a flailing Lord Mayor Raquel from the rubble of the room. "Don't think you're getting away," she grinned, and then she tossed him too, with much less care. He landed in the ship with a yelp. Ruth glanced back at Dragon, as if to ask whether he wanted to go flying too. "I can make the jump myself, thanks," he said. He already had one broken arm and wasn't eager for another. "Suit yourself," shrugged Ruth, and then she jumped through the window into the waiting ship. Right then. Dragon stepped forward, towards the smashed window. He hadn't appreciated just how high up he was until this... See, it almost feels like... I know we're reading from this perspective, so we know who the main character is, but if you were reading from Musazi's perspective, he could totally be the main character in this situation. Betrayed by the guy who he thought was, like, his comrade. It's like a total vengeance story, right? And the gap between the window
and the rising of the Musazi hero.
Yeah, the revenge of Musazi is the second fucking arc. The window in the ship was just a little too wide, wasn't it? Maybe he'd be better staying behind. Maybe he could come up with another plan. "Look behind you, idiot," he told himself. A special officer of the Supremacy lay there, not far from the corpses of 3 men. He'd already assisted in the kidnapping of the Lord Mayor of the city. If he stayed, he was dead. If he jumped, he'd live. Unless he slipped. Still, much less of a risk than the alternative. Dragon took a deep breath, built up his flimsy aether, and charged. Excuse me. He honestly didn't think he'd ever run so fast. It was like he was breaking through a thick, invisible fog. Exhilarating. So long as he remembered to jump, he'd be fine. So long as he remembered to jump, okay, it was time to jump. Jump now! Me fucking playing Mario. Dragon jumped and entered the open air between the window and the ship, feet touching only empty space as he passed over the threshold. The ship grew closer. For a horrible, awful second, Dragon pictured the vessel flying up out of sight, leaving him without even the ability to scream as he plummeted down to the city below. Then his feet touched down on metal, and Ruth Blaine caught him. As she did, Dragon could see the heart building outside growing smaller and smaller, further and further away, its appearance finally reflecting its insignificance. And then the doors thumped firmly shut. Bruno worked the controls of the ship, setting up a navigation course that would take them out of the system as quickly as possible. They'd need to find a light point, a station that could launch their ship with the kind of distance they needed. With the kind of cargo they were carrying, no Supremacy-controlled light point would even let them near, so they'd need to stop by one of the less reputable stations. Hiding inside the wreckage of their first ship had been a good move, though. It had allowed Bruno to infiltrate the heart building without minimal fuss, and, when the time came, bust out and steal a ship with which to make their escape. Things couldn't have gone better, but he glanced behind himself. The yacht was much more comfortable than their previous shop. Rather than the chaotic mash of machinery the interior had been before, the yacht, the Veritas, apparently, was all comfy chairs and roomy, rooms. Skipper lay sprawled across a couch, nursing his recently treated wound. Ruth sat in a chair nearby, snoozing. That was fine. From what Bruno had been told, she'd been doing a lot of fighting, so she'd need some rest before she was in good condition again. Then there was Hadrian. Bruno narrowed his eyes, glared at the cadet where he stood against the wall. The guy seemed deep in thought, staring down at the floor with a frown. Well, he could do all the thinking he wanted. Bruno still wouldn't trust him. Bruno! Bruno! I guess he wasn't there. I guess he wasn't there. I guess he wasn't there, but I'm still mad. He seems nice, said Serena.
He comes in and he's like, he's our friend now.
Thank you, Serena. Thank you, Serena. No, he doesn't, replied Bruno. He seems like a two-faced coward who will turn on us the second it becomes convenient for him. Oh, you think so? Yes, that's why I said it. Suit yourself! With that, Serena went dormant again. She'd probably forget the entire conversation within the next couple of minutes, truth be told. Well, Bruno wouldn't forget, and he doubted Hadrian would either. They'd snatched him right out of his comfy supremacy post, held him hostage, and almost got him killed. There'd be a grudge there, a strong grudge, and Bruno would be ready when the bastard tried to act on it. Dragon sighed, looking down at the floor. The number of sighs this hour was quickly rising through the double digits. Had he made the right choice? No! Absolutely fucking not! Sorry, that's not what it says. That was my reaction. Probably not. Almost certainly not. It would be a little too generous to call it a choice, really, anyway, since he hadn't even realized he was making it until afterwards. What a mess. They had Raquel tied up in the cargo hold, tied up just as Dragon had been tied up when he'd first met these... Oh my god, Raquel joins the party next. They hadn't been blasted out of the sky yet, so we could only assume his hostage strategy was working. Still, he couldn't be too optimistic. There was every chance of the room around exploding into flame any second. What a mess. His future, too. The cushy do-nothing positions he dreamed of back in training. They were gone. The closest thing he'd get to relaxation now was the brief period in a supremacy cell before they executed him. What method would they use? Firing squad, perhaps? Or would Musashi just cut his head off and be done with it? He wasn't sure which he'd prefer. And yet, despite all the concerns fighting for dominance inside his head, he couldn't find himself regretting it. His heart was dancing to a strange, unfamiliar beat. Dragon! He looked down again, squeezed his eyes shut, suppressed a laugh, smiled properly for the first time in what felt like a long time. What a mess! The ship sailed off into the dark, leaving Kalis Breck behind. I've noticed that in the last few chapters, it's kind of become a thing of like a character repeating the same phrase over and over. The first time you see a certain something, you find it incredible. Awe-inspiring. For Dragon Hadrian, that thing had been the sky. In Crestpool, the Breather City... what's Breather mean again?
That's just like, it's... this is sort of a rephrasing of an earlier paragraph in the previous chapter. Basically, in Crestpool, it's a big gas giant with these floating cities in it, and they're called Breather Cities. Okay.
All light was artificial, all air recycled. The idea of a sun was a bad joke, the closest thing a pale glow through the clouds. Quite often, Dragon would stand on one of Breather 19's balconies and stare up, trying to see them. He'd read about them in books, seen them in videographs, these things called stars, lights that made themselves. He never saw a thing. For all he knew, these things called stars were pure fiction. For all he knew, the world that he saw was all there was. But still, stars burned all by themselves, perpetual, never needing anyone or depending on anyone. There wasn't a thing in the world that could hurt them. And they shone so bright, like nothing else in the universe. Bright enough to light up the dark. Dragon Hadrian thought that he would quite like to be a star. Oh my god, they're humanizing him! No! Oh, this is so good!
Thank you.
What the hell? What the hell? I don't know what to think, man. This is insanity. What are you doing to me, Tan? What are you doing to me?
I have your emotions under my control.
I know. I swear to God, if you stop writing this web serial, I will fly to England and kick you in the head. I will be so upset. Oh my god, this is so good. Alright. Do we want to leave it off there? Say bye to the audience?
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.